Achat, Shtayim, Shalosh. Oh, shalom, my friends. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And I am delighted to have an actress and songstress in the neighborhood with us. Let me tell you some of the things that she's done. She's done on Broadway shows like High Society and Anna Karenina, and she's even a Tony nominee for the lovely little show L'Amour. She's done a bunch of off-Broadway shows like Irish Repertory Theater, shows like Finian's Rainbow, and the importance of being earnest, and on a clear day you can see forever, and even some musicals with shorter titles. Plus, you've seen her on TV in Central Park West. She writes for the New York Times, and here's the big deal. She's got a recent album out. It's called Sondheim Sublime, and she's going to be singing songs from it in East Hampton tomorrow, June 30th. Go to guildhall.org to find out more about that. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the neighborhood, Melissa Errico. Shalom, Melissa.
Well, hello. You have to come on the road with me. I've never had such an enthusiastic intro.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much.
You gotta go on the road.
I know. I'm on the road. My people have been on the road for 40 years, so I'd like to be more settled. Now, you are not, unfortunately, you are not Jewish.
I am not, no.
Oh, but here's the deal.
I have been told well, anyway, but most of my friends are. You see, I fit right in.
Because you're a theater person.
I'm Italian.
Now, I don't understand. You're Italian. How did you get so involved in Irish Repertory Theater off Broadway?
Well, that's actually another funny story.
Oh.
Well, I don't really know. I look Irish. I look Irish, and so I was sort of perfectly cast, and they just never let me go. I eventually married an Irishman, so I think there's some. I've married Patrick McEnroe, another Long Island boy.
Right. Where's he from? Not West Hampstead. Where's he from? Manhasset?
He's actually from Douglaston.
Oh, so Queens.
Yeah. And we went to the same elementary school. And when his brother John McEnroe became one of the great tennis players of history, we were all children together. And then Patrick went into the tennis business, and I used to see him on TV, and I would just sort of occasionally catch him on television and say, "Oh, I grew up with him." And then I started on Broadway when I was 22, my third show. I was in My Fair Lady, and his mom had a little thought. She said, "You know what? I wonder about putting those two together." And she completely set us up.
So you were not like a little boyfriend, girlfriend trading Valentine's cards when you were in third grade?
No. But his mom had an eye for it when I was 25 years old, and she put it all together. It's an arranged marriage.
Well, this I know from. Believe me, from arranged marriages I know. But let me ask you then, I'm sure people are curious, and you mentioned yourself that your brother-in-law is John McEnroe. So are you, do you have family dinners with him? Does he throw things? Is he a nice person when he's not hitting tennis balls around?
Yeah, they're all nice people. I mean, as it turns out, I think I married the handsome and most gentle brother, but I adore John. John is very dynamic. He is certainly not temperamental at the dinner table in any way. But, you know, in the days where John was temperamental on the tennis court, he was right most of the time, and they didn't have the technology that they have now. They invented a camera that now examines the lines. That's where he was fighting most of the time. He knew he had a unique vision. My husband has wonderful vision and strategic intuition as well. But he could see if the ball was in or out, and he would get enraged. They now have a camera that they call the McCam, which is named after John McEnroe.
Oh,
so they
wow.
do replays now with great exactitude, which they couldn't do in those days.
Yeah, but he should have controlled them. I mean, he was not singled out for wrong calls. Every tennis player every baseball player has to deal with an umpire who's looking the wrong way or makes a wrong call. So then you control yourself. You know, that's your career. Back in the day.
Well, anyway, he had passion, and he was fondly remembered ultimately for his passion
and his talent. Yeah.
And his talent, and you know, he was young. But I don't think there's any regrets in the long run. He brought a lot of attention to the game and to the intensity of each decision in the game. So he makes a very entertaining and charming family member, I must say.
Yay!
And he has terrific children and a great wife. So I'm an Italian girl who likes bringing people together. So all I've done is come into the McEnroe family for over 20 years. And
well, last question about that aspect of your life. You're married to a guy who really knows tennis. Your brother-in-law is one of the great tennis players of all time. Do you ever take lessons from them? Are you intimidated to ever get on the court with them?
No, but let's not husband won the French Open.
Right.
Was one of the top tennis players too. I did an awful lot of tennis playing with my own husband when we were dating, which was part of the sort of allure between the two of us was having fun, but also meeting all these wonderful people. And so I do play tennis. I actually don't play tennis with John. I have a daughter who's 13 who she plays tennis with John sometimes. She's a nationally ranked tennis player.
Oh my, yeah, because I thought, wouldn't you be intimidated to play with someone? It's like playing golf with Tiger Woods. I mean, you go. Yeah.
I don't really have occasion to do that. But luckily he has a tennis academy in New York City called the McEnroe Academy in Randall's Island, which is probably the best place to play tennis in the Northeast. And he plays with my daughter and so on. So I love him so much.
I'm in my shuffleboard years, so I'm beyond tennis. But you have 3 children. You got one who's now playing tennis. Do you encourage or discourage them in terms of their artistic talents, and do they want to do what mommy does at some point professionally?
Well, in mirroring John's life, Patrick also married a singer. John married Patti Smythe from the rock band Scandal. And so they're both drawn to artistic women. So I guess the dichotomy is sort of designed in the family tree. But I have twin daughters who are 10, and one of them danced for a couple of years at the New York City Ballet and has gone on to another ballet company in New York City. And the other twin is dancing nonstop and has a gorgeous voice. And they both play guitar and ukulele. And they were at the performing arts camp this summer. So I do have 2 artistic girls. So I don't know if a life in the performing arts is what they would want. It's really, and same with professional tennis. Would Victoria go into professional tennis other than just being a terrific teenage player? This is the crazy thing. My husband and I turned our hobbies into our professions.
And it's worked out okay for you. I mean, you've done a lot of Broadway. You were in My Fair Lady, for gosh sakes.
Yeah, I've done many Broadway shows. 7 or so. And there'll be more. And I work all the time. But this is I literally had a hobby as a little girl, and I was blessed to be able to keep doing it. And I found new ways to do it as I've gotten older and I'm a mom. I traveled this weekend with Michael Feinstein and the Pasadena Pops. I have concerts in London and Paris, traveling all over the world with concerts and with symphonies and jazz bands.
Wow.
So it's been amazing.
I've been to Baldwin, Long Island. That was exciting for me. I was there last week.
I like Baldwin too. Is it Alec from near there?
Oh, is what near there? Sorry?
Is Alec Baldwin actually from that area?
Well, he might be there. He's always in the Hamptons.
My pianist is from my full-time piano player lives in the town of Baldwin.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and he drives there every day. He'll be here tomorrow morning for rehearsal.
And you are rehearsing, by the way. We're going to remind people that you are going to be tomorrow at Guildhall speaking of the Hamptons, in East Hampton, doing songs from your recent album, Sondheim Sublime. So tell us specifically, what are some of the songs, if you don't mind, you'll be doing?
On Sunday, June 30th, at 7 o'clock, the Guildhall, which is the most historic, beautiful theater in East Hampton, we're going to be singing songs from the album I just put out called Sondheim Sublime, and it was on Warner Music, and it's the passion project of my life. Other than the work I've done with Michel Legrand, this is the other thing I love the most. These 2 men, though they're so different, are the composers that really captured me. So the music in the Hamptons, and I've been touring a lot with that. Is some of it's familiar, like you'll hear Send in the Clowns or Losing My Mind, or Not While I'm Around, songs from Sweeney Todd, Into the Woods, Sunday in the Park with George. All of the most common hits of Sondheim, I've really found, I think, his most accessible songs. And you might be interested to know that the sublime, the concept of the sublime, was the inspiration for choosing the songs. But as I was studying what the sublime is, I studied art history in college. I actually came upon some Judaic studies about the sublime.
Yes!
I did. In the 17th century, Rebbe Zellman wrote about the sublime, and it really informs my concerts. And as crazy as it sounds, I wasn't preparing this for you, but the Judaic idea of the sublime says that we have 2 souls inside us. One is for our duties and one is for our desires. And that those two souls war for the citadel of ourselves every day and night.
Whoa.
And
Wow.
when what you want is what you ought to want, that is the state of this life.
Huh. I mean, I know it's duty and desire. I mean, when I get up in the morning, I desire to make a duty, but that's rather different from what you're talking
the
about.
Ideas of this is a deep sort of Judaic idea. But what's very interesting about Sondheim is that idea is in all his writing. What do we want, and what are our responsibilities, and how do we struggle and war every day with those things, whether it's parenting, marriage, sensual things, life and death, whatever. Like literally, Stephen Sondheim is a great philosopher. So if you turn to Rabbi Zellman, for example, another great philosopher, you're going to find some very powerful and exciting overlap. That life is hard and confusing, and the answers to all the questions sometimes are more questions.
Well, yeah, because for me, Sondheim is the king of ambivalence. And it's like, I have this, but I want that, but I have this, but I want that. That's the whole, that's so much of what he says. And it's about settling most of the time and figuring out what that means to settle.
Yeah, or learning to live in contradiction. Like in some weird, flexible way to growing up as an Italian, I lived in a very yes/no world. If you do this, or you're wrong. And one of the things that's fascinating about reading this Rabbi Zellman or so on is that there's so much room for nuance. The nuance of the human experience. It's not that you're allowed to do anything you want, but that there's this nuance that these things exist inside us. And I found it really exciting, actually, and freeing. So maybe I am Jewish.
Maybe could be. Well, Italians and Jews, we are so. Because were you brought up Catholic or Catholic-ish or?
I think the ish would be appropriate.
Fair enough.
And I think it's become a little more ish. I'm in a weird way. I'm more drawn to religious conversation than I am to the right-wrong sides of Catholic life. It's a little bit. It's just not been a complete home run for me.
Fair enough. If you're ever looking to convert, I give lessons. I'm just saying. If you're ever thinking about it. But let me ask you, we've been talking Sondheim. You brought up another composer, Michel Legrand. I know he has a girly name, but it's actually a guy, a French.
It's not a girly name. It's a French name for Michael.
Well, they spell it differently in the French. The French do their thing their way. But yes, it is a Michael kind of Legrand, a grand composer, if you will. So you're doing something all about the movies that he scored at the French Institute. Tell us all about this.
Well, I'm curating a French film festival in New York City at the French Institute Alliance Française, which is like it's called FIAF. It's a organization for French cultural things, and I am
kind of like Edith Piaf. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. Continue.
A little bit like Piaf with an F.
Yes.
No, you're quite right.
Thank you.
And so I'm curating a film festival throughout the summer, and it starts on July 2nd, and there'll be screenings every Tuesday of July of the great musicals or French, sort of what's called the French New Wave movies. So this is another fascination of mine. Many years ago, I worked with Michel Legrand, who's unlike Sondheim, who is a pure theater composer. Michel Legrand is one of the great film composers in the history of the world. And the reason that he's fresh again, in some ways, sadly, is because he recently died. And I starred in his only Broadway show. So in America, I'm sort of regarded as someone who knows best. And I toured and traveled with him, and I made an album with him as well. So I really got to know him.
So do you have any anecdotes? Tell us a funny or a cute story about Michel.
Oh, I have many funny anecdotes. I mean, after working on Broadway with Michel Legrand, I wrote about this, by the way, in the New York Times. I'm a regular writer of essays in the New York Times, and I wrote his Requiem. So this story is more elaborated if anyone wants to look up my name, Melissa Errico, and read the articles. But, Michel was extremely hyper and full of life, and he was very French. He came to Broadway with all the excitement of having won so many Oscars and done so many movies, but never done Broadway. So he's this great hyper enthusiasm. Oh, Melissa, let's do this. Let's make a new song. Broadway show. He wanted to make an album, which we went on to do. And he said that I had to come to Paris to do rehearsals and all this. And then he's the type of person that says, Melissa, let's go to Spain. You have time. Let's go to Spain. This is before I had children. I said, my husband and I looked together. We had a few days. We could go to Spain. We hadn't finished the album completely, but we had a pause. This man took us to an airport right outside of Paris. He flew us over the Pyrenees, but he hadn't explained to us that he was flying the plane.
Oh, wait, physically, I thought he just hired a plane and a driver. He was flying. Oh, boy.
Physically, like, this man has Oscars all over his piano. He's hilarious. He's always in a hurry. And somehow you can find yourself in an airplane with him over the Pyrenees going through a rainstorm.
Wow.
Like, within minutes, like it seems within a few hours, you're like in an airplane. And you think, there's nobody in the world that like him.
Just be happy you married a McEnroe and not a John F. Kennedy Jr. when you're talking about airplanes, for gosh sakes.
Well, I know, that there is a danger, but, Michel somehow lived a life of great spontaneity, and he was very fortunate. And he did have a co-pilot in there, and his named Claude, I do recall. So I have to assume Claude was looking out for us. But Michel Legrand is that kind of whirlwind of a person, a genius.
Now, you did also, we're talking about Sondheim, but I would love an anecdote about him, because not only have you played roles in Passion, and you were, I think you were in Sunday in the Park with George as well, various places.
Yeah, many shows, actually. Why You're a Wolf, and so yeah.
So give us a Sondheim story, if you have one.
A Sondheim story. Well, I have many Sondheim stories. Trying to think if this would be an inappropriate story. I mean, one of the pleasures of being an actress is to get to reinterpret things. And the very first show that I ever did, with Sondheim, I didn't quite realize how famous he was. And so that very first rehearsal of Sunday in the Park with George at the Kennedy Center, he was there, and I made a suggestion that we change the lyrics to one of the songs. Because I had an idea that the character would be seen sort of out of sight while the painter was painting, but instead of doing her makeup, which is a famous scene called the color and light sequence, I thought it would be fun if my character was a little out of view, but that you could see a big bubble bath and that she'd be under all the bubbles in the back, and you'd see her laughing and singing in the water and kicking bubbles, getting ready to go out. And very playful, and I suggested to him that he change some lyrics. And this is like going up to God and saying, it was so. He actually did ultimately.
He did.
So naive and so playful and so excited that I didn't realize that I had done what no one would ever dare do.
Well, he's also very nurturing. I mean, he ran or helped run the Young Playwrights Festival for a bunch of years, so he would be listening to young people and their suggestions. He's apparently very cool that way.
He has written to me many times about the nobility of teaching. So he does think teaching is the most noble thing that you can do. So I'd say that for all his reputation as a complicated, critical person, and he has definitely given me criticism along the way to learn from.
Give us an example.
Well, he says that self-effacement on stage, not showing self-confidence, is very unattractive. And that it's something that I have to be careful of on stage. He really doesn't want me to be shy or self-effacing on stage, ever. He just says to get rid of it pronto.
He meant that specifically for you or for actors in general?
I think it's for people in general. He thinks it's a tremendous waste of time, bringing ourselves down.
Okay.
It's a tremendous waste of time for everyone, and he says he's the king of it. But we waste so much time beating ourselves up. And it's like sometimes we move forward and we take 2 steps backwards.
Oh, I take 8 steps back. That's my life. My God. Well, that's because I move from right to left. Anyway, we're talking with Melissa Errico. I want to remind everybody, we have just a couple of minutes left with her here, but I want to remind folks that
we have the French Film Festival coming up in July.
That's right, Dan.
And I'll be showing movies by Michel Legrand that really are, really show you what was happening in France. People like Jacques Demy, the great filmmaker, and Michel Legrand, the great composer in France, they were the leaders of something called the French New Wave, which was all the cool movies of the 60s.
Well, Truffaut and Godard were they were the vanguard of the New Wave. But
all
yeah.
cool movies. And these two men were both in love also with American musicals, which is what I do full-time, what Sondheim does full-time. But they loved American musicals and that they saw in France, and they decided that they wanted to make their own kind of mesmerizing musical movies. So the movies that I'm showing are kind of a combination of those passions, these French men who are fascinated by American musicals, and they use French actors, they use French locales like Rochefort or Umbrellas of Cherbourg, the town, and it's a combination of a French version of American jazz.
Cool.
If you really get to know Michel's music, it's kind of the French chanson tradition, like French music meets American jazz. It's a kind of fantasy. His movies are a sort of fantasy of what America is, and American musicals really are. In the same way that that plane ride was so crazy, Michel Legrand is crazy in some ways. He's like caught up in the world of jazz, but he's also just an incredibly tender songwriter that makes beautiful songs. So there's a combination of Michel, and you'll hear it in all the movies, of that sort of French ballad tradition,
and that is all happening. We want to get this,
jazz,
yeah. It's like FIAF, right, to find out information about all that. Plus, you're going to be at Guild Hall in East Hampton tomorrow. Go to guildhall.org for tickets and information. Also, we've been asked to let people know that you're all over the East Coast. On July 21st and 22nd, you'll be in Provincetown. On July 23rd, you'll be at Cape Cod. And then you're going to be doing the Arlington, Virginia Signature Theater Summer Cabaret Series, and that is happening towards the end of July. So do you have
here in Washington, D.C. I'm also performing at the French Film Festival on July 16th. His most American, commercial sort of American film was the Thomas Crown Affair. And I'll be singing songs from it before the movie.
Wonderful. Now,
July 16th, and that's in New York City.
We have time for one more question with Melissa Errico. It's just been delightful to be with us today, but I've got to ask this. I want to hear this story. Since we're talking a little bit about children and teaching and learning, your first time on stage when you were a child involved the Girl Scouts and a rather politically incorrect show. Please share.
I didn't think of it as politically incorrect. And isn't it funny how these things change?
Yeah.
It was the song La Cucaracha, which is a very famous Mexican song, and my Girl Scout troop on International Day, we were to do a number that was from Mexico, and there were all the dancers and so on, beautiful Mexican skirts, and then somebody who was the leading lady got to be the cockroach. And it turns out that my best friend, Christine, got extremely nervous. She was dressed like a cockroach. She had this brown, wings on and the little antenna, and she looked at herself in the mirror as the star/cockroach, and she couldn't go on. And my mother was like, Melissa can do it. So I dressed quickly like the cockroach and took Christine out of her misery, and the star was born. And
all the other kids were chasing you around the stage singing La Cucaracha. And you don't get the political incorrectness of this.
I love being in the circus. I love being the center of all the ruckus and the dancing and being, chased around as a cockroach. It's the silliest thing, but, if I have an essential value, it's to belong. I am not motivated only by my own expressiveness and so on. I love belonging to the theater. I love belonging to the community. And I think that was no exception. I did like being in the cockroach outfit, but I like being in the middle of it all.
Well, let me tell you, you now belong to the Daverhood. As a friend of this program, Dave's gone by. Melissa Errico, see her tomorrow night in East Hampton. See her at FIAF doing all the Legrand movies. You got melissaerrico.com, right?
melissaerrico.com has all the dates, and we always have fun at our concerts. We learn things. The music is always sexy and fun, and I don't go on and on. It's not too long, and I always wear something to remember. So let's all make some new friends. It'd be great to see you.
Our friend Melissa Errico, thank you so much for being in the Daverhood, and shalom to you.
Shalom. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.